Great, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome for joining me today in our uLaw webinar. In today's topic, we're going to be talking and discussing about court forms automation and the document generation and how forms automation can actually help you expedite a lot of the tasks that you have to accomplish as a business. I do as housekeeping, sorry. So used to bookkeeping now. I do request that you use the chat window to ask any questions that you may have. Today's webinar is not yet accredited for CPD, so it's not accredited, but we're hoping that it will be in a few more weeks. But today's particular session is not accredited for a CPD, but it's going to be a session where we're going to demonstrate a lot of these capabilities and kind of walk you through how you can accomplish a better sense of automation for your office, especially when it comes to generating documents as well as court forms, specifically to the jurisdiction in Ontario, but we're investing our effort and time to build these court forms for other jurisdictions across Canada as well. Okay, and would appreciate if you could use the chat window to ask questions during the session. Our support staff would be more than happy to answer them, or I can take those questions at the end of the session as well. Like with any other uLaw webinar, today's webinar has a set agenda, and the agenda truly is to establish what value does these court form automation and document generation features, what value can that bring to your business? How can that reduce the amount of time and effort that you spend many times on a very labor-intensive manual process to generate these documents, which are a must-have purely based on the nature of your beast. I mean, legal documentation is a big component of what you do out of your office, and what we've tried to accomplish is give you a bit of a heads up, give you a little bit of a, I would say, headway in generating these documents by pre-populating information as we already gather some of this information through our product, and we're trying to help you expedite the delivery of these documents to your clients. How can it better streamline the important aspects of your business? So we'll talk about how we've integrated the whole compliance as well into, that's one of our new features. We've integrated the whole compliance component behind these document generation, so kind of keeping all of those compliant and important documents that are required for audits all grouped in one bundle based on the context of what those documents mean. Okay? And in case of court forms automation, we'll talk a little bit about additional parties, how we accomplish what we do. With court forms, we'll probably take one or two examples of maybe a small claims landlord tenant board. But in other cases, we'll look at documents that you would anyway generate out of your legal office, documents such as your retainer letters. How can you automate, some of the manual entry that goes into the information that goes into these documents and letters, as well as the court forms that you generate based on the silo of business that you operate in. And just to give you a feel for the types of examples of documents we're looking at, I spoke about retainer letters, but if you really look at the compliance checklist for your client intake and matter management, you have documents such as client ID verification, you have documents such as conflict screening report, etc., that are a big component, including source of contact, which is a very important document that is not only a law society document, but can be a very important document for you to appreciate where you're getting your clients from. And when you look at some of the financial forms, so we're looking at the audit readiness of and how the forms automation, document pre-population can help you. We now today generate Form 9As. So if you go through the process of doing all these electronic fund transfers, especially for our friends in Ontario, you do have to fill out the Form 9A. Now uLaw prevents you from losing those documents because we have a very consolidated document of all the Form 9As that you've generated over a period of time. Okay, and then most importantly, we'll also cover court forms. One of the things that we do, and this is a question that we're being asked all the time, and when we talk about court forms as a service level agreement, we look at all the court forms across different types of areas of practice, be it small claims, family law, accident benefits, HTA, etc. And we have an SLA of 2 weeks. So from the time that a new form has been published, we do our best to keep that form up to date within the uLaw product in about 2 weeks. Sometimes it happens that our ecosystem, our clients and well-wishers would give it to us ahead of time, or sometimes indicate there's a new change that's coming up. Sometimes, based on the nuance of the document, it might take over 2 weeks to about 3 weeks, but on an average, we've been fairly successful in bringing in a bit of an updation or an updated set of court documents within 2 weeks of them being available on the websites. Okay, so you don't have to then go and download these forms, various different individual websites based on your areas of practice. That's truly the purpose of today's webinar, strictly focus on these components. And I'm going to be spending a good majority of my time demonstrating it through the eyes of uLaw, through how uLaw accomplishes and provides you with not only best practices, but a bit of time saving as well in automating these documents and forms. Okay. So again, just setting the context for those who are new to legal business and who are joining us today. I can see a few of them who are fairly recent in their practice. If you look at the various different silos of practice, right from small claims, LATB, POA, to criminal accident benefits, and even tribunals, there are many silos of business that require you to generate court forms that are required to be submitted as part of your application filing or as part of the whole process or the 9 yards of you running with that particular matter, right? Be it a 7A or be it a family 8A divorce matter document. Sorry, I think the quick question is around the SLA form. So sorry to mislead you there. It's really not an SLA form. It's a service level agreement that uLaw has to update the court forms within uLaw within 2 weeks of it being available on the court's website. Okay. And we also have a fun video, and we're going to be sharing this presentation to you after it's done. Please take the time to review that fun video that we've created. It kind of quickly looks at the comparison of you filling these forms out on a manual basis to how we may be able to help automate filling those forms for you. Okay, so it's a really nice video. Kind of gives you a side-by-side comparison of the manual way versus the automated way of uLaw. So do take the time to review it. And if you look at how we build the information that goes into these court forms, it's purely based on the relationship that you build within a matter by using the concept of additional parties. Okay, so if it's a situation of a small claims matter where you have a plaintiff and a defendant, or maybe multiple defendants, and either or the situation of a landlord and a tenant, and again you could have multiples as well, or if it's a family matter where you have a case of an applicant, you could have additional individuals involved in that divorce matter. You could have a child. The child may have his or her own legal representative. So there's many different parties, if you really look at it, that would be involved in a particular matter. And we'll talk quickly about how you bring those different parties into a matter and how that facilitates into helping you fill out those court forms, which in many ways are repetitive information components. And truly the time saving is, especially when you make errors, even so when you make errors, to be quite honest. So when you make those errors, then the opportunity and the time that it takes for you to go back and correct those errors manually is what takes you a lot more time. And that's where a lot of the automation helps you to reduce that time, save that time for better, more productive things in your firm. Okay? So we talked about a brief set of areas of practice that have a lot of court forms. And we'll just started to talk about how additional parties become an integral component of how you would associate an individual to a matter and how that relates into a court form document. And we've had this now in our roadmap, and we've been working away But for some of our friends who are joining us from other jurisdictions today, this is kind of our real priority for us to not only continue to grow our areas of practice in Ontario. So we're looking at certain select areas and documents within immigration as our next big investment, but we've already got ahead to start looking at court forms across these provinces. Okay, we actually do have court forms for the Atlantic provinces for those who are joining us today from Nova Scotia. Okay, and for those who don't know us, we are a Canadian cloud-based legal accounting and practice management software company. We're based out of Ottawa, and we continue to work hard to serve our legal practitioners and friends through our software, keeping them compliant and providing them a very cost-effective and a convenient product that they can depend on. Okay. I'm going to, as promised, and with most of these types of webinars that are not necessarily CPD, we do take the advantage of actually walking through the product. That way, it's not it's a lot more engaging than just me walking you through slides. And as I walk you through how this is done and walk you through the product, I again sincerely request your participation by using the chat window. Okay? We do offer a no obligation 30-day trial. 30 days are no more the norm. If you look at it in the cloud industry, it's 14 days has almost become the norm. But we recognize that 30 days, if not more, is a must-need in this particular industry, and we continue to provide that level of time for our friends to understand the product and appreciate it if the product even is meaningful. Okay? That was a question that was asked in our previous webinar. I thought I'll take this opportunity to talk about it. Alrighty. So, having walked through those presentations, setting the context, I really want to jump into using my Playground account. For many of my friends who have joined me for the second or the nth time in our webinar, we use our fictitious character Roger Moore as a way of demonstrating the product capabilities. And I'm logged into my Playground account as Roger Moore. And before I get started to talk to you about court forms automation, let me just kind of draw the picture about how we generate forms, what are those documents, and how do you go about generating them as well. Okay? So if you really look at the core components of be it compliance or just day-to-day business operations and the type of documents that you generate, it really starts with your client. Okay? So in the case of uLaw, we manage your contacts or your people record, or sometimes it could be organizations and companies that you work with. And these people records, if you will, can be tagged, or we call them groups, can be grouped under various different classifications. So some of these groups include clients, very integral. If it's actually a client that you're working with, then that contact becomes part of that client group. Okay? And only for clients are you able to create a matter, right? But then you also have other groups that you can create yourself. You've got your plaintiffs, representatives, defendants, applicants, respondents in the case of a family matter, landlord and tenant in the case of the LATB. So when you come across these different other contacts, you are now able to store that information in one time, basically their first name, last name, address, phone number, etc. You store them within uLaw and then repurpose that information across the matter that you've created for a particular client. Okay, so we'll jump into that a bit later in the demonstration while I walk you through creating a contact, everything else. But let's assume we're looking at John Depp, who's a client. If you really look at the document generation, so this is a list of documents that when you look at the bookkeeping guidelines, they break down the different documents and the audit requirements into subcomponents, right? So if you've got your contact and client intake as a subcomponent of your compliance documents, and we've basically just taken that the same set of documents that are expected and given it to you under generating those documents within that group of compliance. For example, if you look at your conflict screening report, that is most certainly a a requirement or a compliance that you have to, and hopefully you've done that conflict screening at the time of intake. Source of contact. It's a very important report that gives you, so for the month of January, if I were to download that report or document, this particular document serves multiple purposes. One, it's a document that the auditor may ask you for so that they can have a look at a spread of where you're getting your clients from. It's not something people look at and frown upon. It's not something they advise you upon. But if they do see that you're getting, let's say, source of referrals from multiple areas, then obviously they encourage you, they give you the best practice thought process. But then even for you as an individual or as a firm, this document serves as a way for you to have that introspection of where those clients are coming from. How did they get to know you as that legal firm? So in this case, I've had playground account information. About 16% of the clients that I had an intake came through referral from friends. Another 16% came from employee referrals, but a good 50% came out of the advertisement as a category, right? You can really look at, you've so far had 6 clients, and that's the spread. And then you obviously have a few folks that you've not categorized, which you can go ahead and categorize it at a later time, okay? So from a document generation perspective, it's important that you enter the information within the practice management software. In this case, it's uLaw, but then also be able to repurpose that information that you've entered, all that effort that you've put in, to give you these meaningful documents that are both compliant but also meaningful, side by side. The client fee book is also an equally important client statement that someone may ask you for, your client may actually ask you for. And even to the point where we talk about branding, we give you the opportunity to generate those envelopes or a specific contact. You can, if you're just sending out a closing letter, you'll probably be able to generate that envelope right away, print it, maybe have your own logo on it as well. You can decide how you like to tile it. A very high-level introduction to how document generation integrates the data that you provided and gives you those documents and forms. We've not yet gone into forms, but documents that are relevant to your business. Okay. Now we've just looked at it from a client intake and a contact perspective. So if you really look at it, I'm within the panel of contacts. Now I move on to maybe the next layer of my business. So once I've created that contact, after I've done my conflict screening and I've made sure that it's fine to go ahead and represent this client, I'm obviously going to create a matter for that client. Okay, so once I create a matter or a file, then obviously you go through the motion of, accepting retainers, generating all those documents, even retainer letters to begin with. Now the fact that uLaw, as a practice management software, has got all the information about John Depp as a client. It has the information about yourself because you're the representing legal party. And we also kind of know what this matter is about because you've provided us that one time. At a matter level, which is the next component of your compliance document as well as your business document, we've looked at client intake and contacts. We're now jumping into matter. If you really look at the compliance set of documents, which are both compliant related as well as business related, we have all the information that we've captured are now able to be provided or generated as documents. So we looked at client ID verification. Okay, so it really comes down to clicking a button to generating that document or regenerating that document, if you will. And we try and pre-fill these documents with information that we already know. Obviously, as I mentioned, this is a head start. This is to reduce the amount of handwriting or typing that you would have to do to enter this information anyways in the first place, right? So we're just trying to help you save time. You can obviously write on top of that. If it didn't capture the phone number, you can add it in. There are certain things that only you know what you've done with it, so you can capture the driver's license, and you can obviously file this. Okay. Client intake, very important document. And if you actually look at the client intake, we even capture the component of the source of contact. So if you really go back to looking at the client, at the time of doing the client intake, a very important question that you probably want to ask, or you want to have one of your front office folks ask, is how did John Depp get to know you as legal officer? So we've kind of tagged it as an advertisement, which becomes a critical piece of information that they ask in the client intake form, and this is a bookkeeping compliance document. How did you hear about us? So repurposing relevant information and populating it in documents wherever meaningful is a big part of what we do as a company and as a product, beyond the legal accounting and business accounting flavors to the product. Okay? So this is one of our core strengths as well. Again, you can build on it. So by just clicking on, so for those who don't necessarily know what all the documents that are relevant, but just going in and generating those documents and looking at compliance at least an initial level, it gives you a good subset of all the documents that will be meaningful. Conflict screening report, even more important. So one thing is to do the conflict screening. The other thing is to report, what information you gathered, why did you determine that this individual or this person was not a conflict, right? So you could say this was a new client. This is truly to validate and document the nature of your conflict screening. And it's important that you document this and you sign this. Yeah? And the core aspect of what I'm trying to accomplish in terms of today's webinar is that it's important for legal professionals in today's day and age to be able to maximize the time that they put in practice management and bookkeeping, because there are other things that have to be taken care of. These back office components are better suited to be as automated and as self-directing as possible to save you the time to accomplish bigger, better things, right? Even if you're going to look at generating a retainer letter, which is one of the first set of documents that you would sign up with that client, there are pieces of information that can be merged and pre-populated, just to give you that heads up. So even say if you have $500 retainer, you can generate this in MS Word. And we also support French as a language today. And you can choose different styles of what that retainer letter looks like. And that gives you the relevant documents with the information that's pre-captured. We've got John's information, which you didn't have to handwrite. All of the lawyer's information, which you didn't have to type again. And the fact that you've generated this in Word gives you the flexibility to modify it and tweak it as needed. Okay? Alrighty. Moving along. As you can notice, we've also broken it down by the compliance components. So client intake, set of documents that you probably want to generate and keep it available maybe on a quarterly basis, statement of activities, or on a need basis based on client's interest. And even to the point of a non-engagement letter. So let's say you start the file and the client actually decides to not engage you, or maybe the other way around. You still have to have a logical closure to that file through this non-engagement document, right? And if you look at these documents, whether that's court forms or otherwise, they vary in different formats. We today support PDF and Word document. That was one of the questions that came about, and I hope that answered that question. So we generate documents today in PDF, Word document. Some of the accounting numbers are also generated in CSV or Excel sheets. Okay. What other set of documents can you generate? If you really look at certain files that have a lot of information in them, the statement of activities would be that much more holistic because it had a lot more data. This obviously doesn't have any data as there's no documents. All right, so let me now take an example and shift gears to the court forms, and then I will jump into the financial documents that can be automated as well. Okay, to do so, let's look at this particular file. So let's look at John Depp. So we've already added the client. And just for the purposes of this demonstration, let me make this to start with a small claims matter. Okay, I'm just going to retag it. Not the best idea, but for saving time, I don't want to spend the time in recreating clients. So let's assume that this was a small claim matter, maybe a fence issue, one of the most popular, or a slip and fall. Okay. And for you to not generate these court forms that come along with, maybe a plaintiff's claim or maybe anything else for a small claim matter. So let's assume it is a plaintiff's claim, and you're representing the plaintiff, who's John in this case, and Steffi is the defendant. Let's paint that picture now and have all those actors ready. So one of the information you know right now is John's information. We already have your information. But the two unknown pieces of information at this time is the information of Steffi. We just know her name. We put it in as a file as part of the title. But we obviously need Steffi's information. And we also may want to understand who is Steffi's legal representative. Okay, so that's something that we don't have today. And if you look at our additional parties tab, that's exactly what we're asking for. We're basically asking you, as the legal practitioner, to use the information you've provided and stored in uLaw and associate those contacts as parties within the matter. Okay? There's two purposes for that. One is for your conflict screening. So uLaw does a very thorough conflict screening. If you actually associate Steffi as a defendant in this case, and the next time you actually create a file or someone comes in, walks in and has the name Steffi, uLaw would be able to tell you or your firm's front office personnel that a similar name or Steffi was a defendant on this John Depp matter. Okay? You obviously have to make an informed decision, but we as a product give you the relevant data and the information to make that decision. So let's go ahead and save that information. So we don't know who Steffi, let's just add her. So we'd say add new contact, and you're basically adding it as a defendant. And you can add it as anyone you like, but it's easier if you were to group them. Well, let's say this is Steffi Gonzalez. Give Steffi an address. Mark it as a mailing address, and that's all information I need at this time. So Steffi is the defendant, and now we've got her information. So the next time you walk in, you go into your defendants group, the fact that you've done the right thing of storing it within that group makes it very easy for you to pick that person's information. Okay? And let's assume Steffi's representative is another contact. I do have some pre-recorded set of representatives, which I would love to use. So let's use Stefan Edberg in Ottawa as the legal representative for Steffi. So I would now come back into my John Depp matter. I would add a party, and one of the first parties I would add is that of a defendant, because I already know my plaintiff, I'm going to search for Gonzalez. There's quite a few Gonzalez's, but I'm looking for Steffi Gonzalez. And I save, and I've just associated that particular contact and her information as a party to this matter. Now, strictly followed by the representative, the opponent, and I think we said Stefan Edberg, so let's just use that. So essentially in this John Depp small claims matter, we've taken the example of a slip and fall, and we've just associated Steffi and Stefan as the defendant and legal representative of the opponent as parties. And now if I were to generate a court form, which is available again in document generation in uLaw, under forms, as you can notice, under forms, sorry about that, we have right from small claims court, landlord and tenant, POA, HTA, up to mortgage enforcement. I'm going to use small claims as my matter, or as my example, sorry. And if you look at the different court forms, right from 1A to 20R, even claim schedule, we kind of give you a head start. We pretty much keep these forms up to date. And this was the SLA I was talking about. So if the plaintiff's claim form changes in the small claims matter, in the small claims court, then from the time that new version is available, it takes about 2 weeks average for these court forms in uLaw to be modified. Okay. So if I were to choose, let's say, a simple plaintiff's claim, choose the date, and depending on your courthouse, we pre-populate that as well. So let's say this is the courthouse in Ottawa. We have the address. You just have to type in a few of the alphabets. You can populate the claim number. Sometimes you do have that claim number available, or court file number. And all you have to do is, instead of downloading that form and either typing it in or handwriting it, we just associate them in uLaw and then download or generate as any other document that you would generate. And what uLaw does is it associates all these different contacts. It actually scans through that entire form, understands which information needs to be available, and then this happens, right? So we exactly know what information is required in that form, and we're now merging the data that we already have with what's expected to be there. So the courthouse information, what is the courthouse, the claim number, and then you obviously can use, let's say, use the words features and say this check. You can continue to work on this file. So here you go. It's John Depp with all of his information. Obviously try and build on it. Roger Moore, who's the lawyer working with John. You've got Steffi's information as defendant 1, and if you have a defendant 2 or 3, they would get populated. You can add them into the additional parties. They get populated as part of the 1A form. And there you go. So we kind of give you, again, it's not rocket science, but it's definitely a time saver. It's not everything that people buy uLaw for, but it is going to be one of the core components and a value-add feature. Okay, so this is a good example of a court form for small claims. Just for the purposes of this demo, let me just change these parties. So let's assume, or let me just go ahead and create a new matter for John. I'm going to say LATB matter. And if you've noticed, the small claims court matter was a Word document, and that's how they use it. Whereas if we take the example of an LATB, now that's generated in PDF. The reason I say that is if you're a Mac user, you obviously need the corresponding Word plugin to work if you were downloading the core forms directly. So let's use the same information, same piece of individuals. We'll say Steffi Gonzalez. And instead of Steffi being the defendant, I'll probably say she is the tenant. And let's add the same representatives. And this may happen in real life too, right? So you may come across the same lawyer, paralegal who's opposing you every time. So once you have that information, it's easier for you to pre-populate that. So let's say Stefan Cheese, wrong individual. Perfect. And if you made a mistake, like how I just did, it's most certainly on purpose, you change the party, unlock that entry, and save it back. So you can always change the relationship if you made a mistake in doing so. Now you're just generating the appropriate landlord and tenant form. Okay, so maybe it's an application to evict a tenant. If you could L1 to intent. So I'm just going to do a simple, for lack of time, just a simple eviction. And I'll hit the download button. And as I mentioned, you would notice that the LATB form is a PDF. It's an editable PDF, and that's how they give it to you. And so you can still continue to use it as an editable PDF. So you can say, did you give the tenant the notice? Yes. Are you applying for termination? Is he still in possession or she is still in possession? So you can still do all of that. Okay. Got the rental unit that's being used, pre-populated, and there you go. So you've got in a very different format, because this is a little bit more tricky to populate as a software program, because they have specific size cells within which you need to fill that information. You've got John Depp, same concept, with all the information. You can still go ahead and use that form as you would otherwise to populate any other information that uLaw may have not captured. Okay? Those are just two very simple examples, and you can extend the same usage of how we went about generating those forms for many of those different silos. So let's say a notice of intention for a POA as an example, or even a family matter. So if you look at the different court forms, we also look at the Ontario Court of Justice, forms from the Superior Court of Justice, and the court branch as well. So right from a notice of change in representation to a simple application for divorce, 8A, right, up to a cover sheet or notice of approaching dismissal. Again, whatever information we know, whatever information these forms require, we're going to marry them both and populate them as pertinent. And if there's some missing information, we obviously can go back, populate that information in uLaw, and generate these forms again. And that's the beauty of the automation, is that if you do make that mistake, then you correct it in one place, and that's all you have to do. So if you are making a change in the name of this individual, so maybe the name of your client was not John Depp, it was only one P. Imagine if you were doing this manually, you have to regenerate those court forms, retype them, delete them. You know, it's a manual task, right? Whereas in a software program such as uLaw that facilitates that, it's a change in one individual place. So I changed the information, and this is very powerful. If I go back to the client, that information has changed as well. And if I were to generate that same LATB form, the information of John should have changed automatically as well, because we're always capturing the most recent piece of information. There you go. Okay? Now this is one of the core reasons why you want to have software automate as much as these tasks for you, because these are manual, repetitive tasks that are otherwise can be extremely time-taking. I think there's a specific question around document generation, so we'll love to take that offline, and we'll definitely work with you to solve that issue. I will make it a point for our support staff to reach out and help you with that situation. Alrighty, so with another 15 minutes left in our webinar, now that we looked at, just a quick recap, we looked at a contact level, we looked at all the documents and forms that you would probably have to generate at some time, whether you're doing it on a regular basis, getting yourself anytime ready for an audit, or if you're doing it specifically for the reason of an audit. We've kind of grouped the most relevant, both compliant as well as business-ready documents available to you, which incorporates a lot of the data that you've already provided, pre-populates it, so we've got that at a client intake level. You can also generate a much more exhaustive list of that client intake forms under your matter, because the reason being is when you generate it after you've created a file, there's a lot more information that we can pre-populate. For example, the file name, the title, file number, the date that you've opened it, etc. Right? We looked at the other set of matter-based compliance document that can be generated. We spent the last 15-20 minutes looking at court forms and how you can associate contacts as additional parties and auto-generate these court forms across the various different silos that we offer. Now I'll move on, as I mentioned, to some of the more financial documents that are also auto-generated. Okay, a good example, if I go into my document generation once again, you obviously have all of that information spread across the menu options, right? So you've got ledgers being available, but it's just so much more simpler to have it under one umbrella, and that what is the compliance panel. Whether you're generating a reconciliation, again, that's a little bit more exhaustive from an accounting perspective, but it's a click of a button. It's a form and a report regardless. That basically you've gone ahead and reconciled those two numbers, and maybe this was the 19th. This bank date happened to be the 2nd, right? And the reconciliation report, for whatever it's worth, is a kind of an automation too. So basically it looks at all of the numbers between your legal accounting software and your bank, reconciles those transactions, but also gives you, as part of that report, your entire client trust listing, which otherwise would have to be manually generated. I'm sure you have a way of doing this manually, but every time you generate that report, you would obviously have to make it a habit to copy-paste that trust listing. Whereas, as we encourage you to explore the use of software, any software for that matter, explore the use of software to automate many of these tasks for you, not necessarily taking out the human touch in it, but truly to maximize the use of robotics and automation in today's context, right? So if you really look at the trust listing, all of this information is pre-generated, available, and it's all templatized and available to you to just print or store electronically. So if you now look at a trust ledger for information, and if you look at the monthly trust ledger, it's a matter of just clicking a button and making that available, right? Here's your trust ledger. Now, even better is if, based on the context of these documents, you generate them and really make them available as part of a structure and this is very important, and we talk about this across all our CPDs and webinars that we conduct. If you can make it a habit to capture information as and when they happen, and store the relevant documents at the time of generating it, it makes it a lot more easier for you at the end of the day to reconcile, be confident about having these documents in place, and not second guessing yourself, and there's no more fear mongering. You're not scared of audits, etc. So there's, a ripple effect to how you organize and the discipline that you bring in, and how you can utilize tools to help you through that, developing that discipline. If you've just stored all that information, you've got your trust account reconciliation done for the month of January, have that available, electronically stored, right? You can basically, at any time, you can just go back, look at those accounting documents, and be able to open them and view them right within uLaw. Okay? Generate them, save them, and repurpose them. So going back to some of these other documents, we looked at, reconciliation and trust ledgers, which are very important. The level of sophistication that some of this business automation gives you also takes you to the point of generating Form 9As. Okay, so one thing is to find these transactional data, but the other thing is to store information such as an electronic trust transfer. So at any time, today, uLaw gives you the power of being able to generate these Form 9A or 9C, which are basically electronic transfer requisition documents. So if I were to generate it for the month of January, at any given time, we know, again, the fundamentals to that is the data entry is right, but if you can promise to enter the data right at the right time, we promise to give you all the relevant reports and documents, and you don't have to generate them yourself. So for the whole month of January, starting with Jan 4th, here are all the requisitions that you've made. So specifically for the client, Mr. Amar, you've had a transfer from your TD bank to your Scotia, from your trust to general, and this is a report that the Law Society expects you to provide. In fact, it requires you to sign, 3 times. But if you're busy, you can actually do all the electronic transfer, don't have to fill the Form A at that time. Not the best thing, but will still give you, a room for a bit of time. Always come back end of the week, generate your set of Form 9As, review them, and sign them and have them available. Okay, doesn't get better than that, right? Because all that information you don't have to retype. Because otherwise, this is a form that you would have to fill out every time you do an electronic fund transfer. And we capture it across dates, amounts. We also do the reason why you did that. We also pre-populate, in fact, all of the information. So I know I have it today till the 18th. So let's just go ahead. I'll give you a quick example. Just so you understand how automation needs to function and how that can be now extended to automate many of the core functionalities that your back office requires. So let's assume you got for John Depp for this LATB matter, we received a $500 retainer, okay? And so maybe I received it on the 16th, $500. We got it as a check. You can see we kind of balanced that 500 across matters automatically. A bit of a workload. Let's put it into the LATB matter, okay? And I'll hit apply. You've got that $500 retainer into your trust account. And I'm just going to quickly generate a flat rate fee. I'll use my pre-tax flat rate calculator, and I'll say LATB matter. And I'll say the total is 500, so we know exactly the pre-tax flat rate, provided that we're adding the HST to that. I'll add it. And this is purely for the purpose of this demo. Just making stuff up, right, really. Okay. Yeah, obviously, you would probably substantiate it in a more meaningful way. So you've just now docketed the effort for about $500. If I were to go ahead and generate an invoice, not a good habit, but I'm just doing it for the purpose of this demo, skipping that preview so that you can go ahead and generate that invoice. Otherwise, it's a great habit to always do a preview, get it authorized, verified before you can actually generate it. And let's say the final step in the puzzle, which a lot of our friends forget today, is actually doing the trust transfer. That's where the Form 9A sets in, right? Especially if you're doing electronic fund transfer. So let's assume you've actually moved that eligible $500 trust money from your pooled trust account to your general account. You have your TD open. Let's say it's an electronic transfer. Basically reflect that in your bookkeeping software, which is uLaw in this context. And I'm going to choose that particular $500. Say it's going from my TD and it's going into my, this is a Playground account, so it happens to be a Scotiabank account. And if I were to choose electronic fund transfer, for one, we give you the opportunity to fill that Form 9A right away. If you want to be very meticulous in generating that form, look at how we've pre-populated the information as well. So reduced data entry. We've got the date, we've got the requisition number because you already gave it to us. And if you've stored your trust account number and your general account number already with the uLaw settings, it's pre-populated. All you have to do is download it. Here is a pre-populated Form 9A, and all you have to do is sign it. And technically file it as well. Though it would not be appropriate to file it, technically wouldn't be great to file it here. I would file it specifically under the matter for this particular client. There are certain documents you want to categorize based on the nature of the document, and some of them are based on the file itself. So for the file JD 474, you probably want to put it right under that. Maybe even the invoice. It's a great placeholder for that file, right? But the point I was trying to prove all along was now if let's say I did not do that generation, I come back and I'm just catching up, the software and automation should give you that convenience of utilizing all the data entry that you put in to generate that information again when you need it. So it's almost a just-in-time generation of these documents. Again, going from the 4th to today for Mr. John Depp, same requisition number as we saw before. Right? So either you can do it as you're going through the motion of it, or uLaw can generate it for you later on as well. Okay? And the same thing with many other documents, and we obviously covered this in other webinars, so I don't want to dilute the nature of today's conversation. But keep in mind, the idea behind today's webinar was to showcase to you, first, the nature of automating these court forms and documents, but also to highlight and stress the need for you to utilize and explore the use of software to relieve you of all this manual data entry work that is an integral part of your business, and use tools and technology to do as much as automation as possible so that that time is then used for more productive work. Okay? So with that, with another 5 or 6 minutes still remaining in our webinar time today, again, thank you for joining me, and I'd love to open the floor for any questions that you may have with regards to our presentation today. Okay, we've got a first question about the source of contact report. Okay, the question is, what is the source of contact? I believe we did cover it earlier on. So the source of contact report, as we know it, is a document that's part of your bookkeeping guidelines, but it's also, from our perspective, a marketing report. It gives you the ability to reflect upon where your marketing is working based on the fact of where you're getting your clients. And no better than to capture it during a client intake. So when you're just entering the information of your client as they come in, or maybe they do an online client intake, they fill it out themselves, you probably want to ask this information, but how did you know us, right? Was it a referral? Was it came through? Or maybe it was a referral from a friend or a family member. You still want to be able to capture that because that's your referral lead or source of contact. You know, this is in a CRM term, this is basically a lead source. Okay? And once you've captured that at the time of client intake, under reports, or even better under compliance, you have the ability to generate that source of contact report. Now, we have clients that do this on a daily basis, weekly. There are a few folks who do it on a quarterly or a yearly basis. So totally left to your style of operation, but at the least I would say a quarterly basis is really a good habit because it gives you a very good picture. Because if all your eggs are in one basket, if all your leads, all your clients come from, let's say, one particular referral channel, you obviously play the risk of losing that referral channel and potentially losing customers, right? So you obviously want to have a diversified channel of sources of leads, if you will. So over the period of the last 3 months, obviously we're just in January, but you could do that across previous months as well. That's kind of really your spread. So that's what the source of contact report is. Hope that answered that question. Do I need to fill a Form 9A even if I do this at the teller? Okay, that's a good question. I don't believe so. I believe this is only, the electronic fund transfer only happens if you were to do this yourself using the electronic means or the online banking, if you will. Okay. I hope this was your time well spent. Again, thank you very much for joining us today, and we wish you a fantastic weekend ahead. Thank you.